Good afternoon to everybody, and welcome to this webinar, Evolving Higher Education, Teaching the Nursing Students of Today. So just a little bit of housekeeping before we really get going. Just to let everybody know, we are recording this session so that we can distribute it afterwards, just for your information. And also to say that we really welcome questions for our panelists, so please do put them into the Q&A as you go along. You should be able to find the Q&A in the sort of what do they call it, the bar, the toolbar at the bottom, although I'm sure you're all very familiar with that already. So hopefully we'll have some time at the end to put these to our panelists, or even as we go through, if it looks like it's the appropriate moment to do so. So today we're going to be looking at how you can solve some of the challenges you may be facing in the teaching of biosciences through the dual pillars of clear learning objectives and blended or hybrid learning. And we're delighted to be joined by Dr. Alison Wood and Professor Gabrielle Finn, both of whom have recently worked with us to help us develop our support offering to help you in this area. Dr. Alison Wood is a programme lead on the independent prescribing course at Queen Margaret University, Edinburgh. She has extensive experience of teaching and learning in nursing through various posts held over the last 6 years, I believe, following over a decade in nursing practice while she was completing her master's and PhD. Professor Gabrielle Finn is the Vice Dean for Teaching, Learning and Students, and Professor of Medical Education in the Faculty of Biology, Medicine and Health at the University of Manchester. And previously, she was a founding director of the Health Professions Education Unit and chair of the Postgraduate Board of the Hull York Medical School. Crucially, for the purposes of this webinar, they were both involved in research in and around 2019 and 2020 that resulted in the creation of a set of core standards specifically for A and P. Alison, as part of the Biosciences in Nursing Education Specialist Group, I believe that's called BINE, led on the development of the physiology objectives, and Gabrielle was part of a group funded by the Anatomical Society that led on the development of the anatomy learning objectives. And we also have with us today our very own Marie Meskel, who is one of our senior academic consultants here at McGraw Hill. Until around 18 months ago, Marie herself was working in academia as an instructor in anatomy at the School of Nursing and Midwifery at UCD, and more recently as an instructional designer specialising in technology-enhanced learning. And today her role with us is to spread that expertise further, working with institutions across the UK and Ireland to help them adopt hybrid teaching and learning approaches. So jumping straight in now, let's start with those learning outcomes for anatomy and physiology, and just why they are so important and where the impetus for this research that you engaged in came from. If I could go first to Gabrielle on this one, and then to Alison.
Thanks. Yeah, so we initially started working on the outcomes as a project from the Anatomical Society with Siobhan Connolly as part of her PhD work. So Siobhan comes from a nursing background and had identified the need to have some more clarity, I guess, and unity across the way that anatomy is taught for nursing students. She did quite a lot of scoping conversations with BINE, the Biosciences Nurse Education Network, and had been, reading lots of the documentation from colleges and accreditors, and just really identified a huge gap there. So it was a project that tried to sort of, get consensus to look at how and why anatomy is important as a building block for clinical practice, and to try and bring some structure, for want of a better word, to that.
Fabulous. And same question to you, Alison. Hello.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, and the physiology one really followed on from Gabs and Siobhan's piece on anatomy, because during the discussions around anatomy, we all in the room and from discussions within BINE and wider, all agreed that actually the way that academics engage with students on these topics isn't always necessarily separately. Sometimes it is, but sometimes it's really integrated. And really underpinning that was the challenge of how do we kind of get that consistency when we have programs that are not standardized. So we have NMC where they say we require some of these elements, but it's not too prescriptive, which is great because it allows us to put our own spin and really, you know, adapt our own programs to how we would like it to be within the universities. But with that, we don't have a really strong scaffolding of what definitely needs to be there. So that's where both of the projects have really allowed that agreement of these are key things that we know underpin nursing practice and need to be taught at some point during an educational program for a nurse, whether that's in an undergraduate or a pre-registration master's program. It gives that flexibility with the outcome of where you position that, but gives some stability on what needs to be there.
That's great. Yeah. So if I'm understanding correctly, previously there was a kind of a vacuum, I suppose, of really clear, a really clear set of learning objectives. So it was then down to individual instructors to really decide what needed to be there and not through their own interpretation of the nursing council sort of guidelines. Is that right?
Yeah, so within the NMC standards, there isn't a clear, it doesn't specify exactly what needs to be taught when, which is different for some of the other professions, particularly medicine, where it is a lot more agreed, or has been in the past a lot more agreed and clear cut from likes of the GMC.
So I can see why that was really so important then to put that together. Have you seen this then since you developed, I think, was it 79? I can't remember what the numbers, there were sort of 79 learning objectives for anatomy and 100 and something for physiology, or the other way around, or something like that. So have you seen those then now being put into practice, perhaps in your own institutions or in your own nursing curricula? And for example, did you identify as a result any gaps perhaps that needed filling, or has it changed how long you have to spend teaching anatomy and physiology in your modules? Or have you seen the kind of practical application of this coming to fruition, as it were? So perhaps to Alison or Gabrielle.
Yeah, I'll start. Yeah, definitely. I think what's been really helpful is that it's provided a platform for academics to feel that they've got something to follow and something that people have agreed and given some time to, for academics to fight for that time within the curriculum, within the classroom. There's certainly been some further pieces of work that have taken both the sets of learning outcomes together and looking at how you scaffold that into a programme. And certainly that's been done locally, but I'm aware through the BIND group of others who have been doing the same, using it as a sort of a framework to go, what have we got and what do we not have? And I think depending on where you work and who is around you, that sometimes will give different areas of the anatomy and physiology curriculum more a strong or a lesser focus, depending on people's specialty areas, who you've got around that to normally delivers those things, but also depending on if your programme is shared between other professions, or if you're teaching alongside midwives, or if it's multi-field nursing, or if some may only be adults. So that again can have a bit of an impact on what takes the focus, or how you're dividing that up within a curriculum. And again, the change of whether it's whether it's live, whether it's lectures, whether it's online, all of these things that we've been dealing with, from COVID and the fallout since then, have had a bit of an impact on how we are exploring some of these concepts and, looking at them in different ways.
Of course. Yeah, and same to you, Gabrielle. Then, do you think has it changed perhaps the amount of time that you spend on anatomy and physiology, or enabled you to kind of manage that time better?
I certainly think it's helped in terms of trying to ensure equity of access for nurses and other allied health professionals into dissecting rooms and anatomy spaces. What I maybe should have said at the beginning is we'd done this for mapping with the GMC and the Anatomical Society for undergraduate medical students, and felt there was a real need to do this for nursing. Took a slightly different approach as well, in that the nursing one is much more integrated with clinical cases and scenarios as a table within the document, with better mapping, I think, than we had for the medics. And I do think that highlighting the clinical need for anatomy and why it's so important, and it's not just rote learning of structures, really did help give the need for it within a nursing curriculum more prominence. I think it really, for maybe your policymakers and your curriculum developers, not necessarily the anatomists and the nurses who've always known it was important, but for all those other stakeholders, I think that was really powerful.
Oh, I think that's really
And
interesting.
then, and as a result, then that's when you start to get, a little more space in the curriculum for for these important subjects.
Yeah.
They really are the building blocks.
Yeah, because I think I said in the sort of the invite for the webinar, one of the nursing is, I read some of that nursing is one of the toughest degrees. In fact, I think the Guinness Book of Records thinks it's the toughest, just because of all the very many things that you've got to do within within really a shortish space of time. And of course they're out in clinical placements and what have you. So I guess anything that helps with time management or managing to sort of allocate the time more efficiently is really beneficial. And of course, you've both been working with McGraw Hill recently, alongside, as you mentioned earlier, Siobhan Connolly from NHS Scotland and Colin Chandler from the University of Edinburgh, to map those objectives to our content in and around Hull's essentials of anatomy and physiology and Connect. And I just wanted to pass to Marie very quickly there to talk about the background to that work and how that came about. Over to you, Marie.
Well, thanks. Yeah, how did it come about? I suppose I had been involved to some extent, and not as much as these two ladies here, but to the development of learning outcomes. And as being a former academic in teaching anatomy and physiology in the classroom, knew about the constraints of the curriculum and the time that wasn't maybe there to teach all of the different learning outcomes pertaining to learning outcome within a curriculum. And then moving into McGraw Hill in terms of looking at the adaptive courseware. I suppose I've been a lucky person in a way, in that I have utilized all of the adaptive courseware solution from McGraw Hill to teach in the classroom, and I've seen the benefit for students in terms of getting that really good scaffold in A&P learning to help them be successful within their nursing careers. So when I moved into McGraw Hill, I knew of the work of the learning outcomes, and I wanted to, I suppose, work with subject matter experts that really had an in-depth knowledge of the anatomy and physiology learning outcomes that were required for nursing undergraduate curricula, and see if they could map them to and digitally curate content within McGraw Hill Connect platform. And that was the test, that was the challenge. And it was a big challenge that I put to Siobhan and Gabrielle in respect of the anatomy, and to Alison and Colin in respect of the physiology. They did a sterling job. They worked tirelessly for about 5 months in terms of mapping and curating digital content within the McGraw Hill Connect platform. So essentially, that's where the project came from, because as Gabrielle said, this work had been done previously for medical students and medical undergraduate curricula. It hadn't been really looked at in nursing in terms of the learning outcomes, and then taking that good work in relation to learning outcomes for A&P and aligning that then with the content within the Connect platform to see if there was a digital resource out there that would be able to support instructors in their teaching of these particular subjects. So that's where we're at today.
Wow. So passing back to you then, Alison and Gabrielle, what was it like working with McGraw Hill on this as subject matter experts? And were there any kind of big discoveries for you? So passing to Alison first this time. Oh, sorry.
Where to start? It was, I think, like learning anything that's new, the time that it took to get into it. So you know what you're looking for, and then you start to go down this rabbit hole of so many resources and things. And actually, the academic in me gets excited, and I was like, "Oh, look at that! Look at that!" And you're going, "Oh, that's the anatomy stuff. Stop looking at that. You know, I'm here focus on. You know, I'm learning how to become 27 for physiology. You know, where is it? Because there were so many things that you could kind of see and explore. The interactive nature of all of the elements was really, really interesting, and it just made you think about I suppose, reaffirm some of the things that you as an academic already do, and then other ways that you could engage with different topics. Thought it was quite interesting looking at holes as well. There was quite a lot that covered so many parts of the physiology set of outcomes. But there's definitely one I think we struggle to find. I can't now think of it off the top of my head, because not everything is where you think it should be in your head, but that was the whole point of the physiology outcomes. It was trying to make a standardized list rather than me as the academic on how I would teach it. So that was what took some time, was to think, you know, I'm not writing it as a lecturer thinking these are the things that I want on my slides. I need to think of it as a set of outcomes, and where do I find all of that? But once you get into the platform, there were so many things to see and do and pull in, and there were some outcomes that just had so many things we could list underneath them around what was available for you know, academic staff, but also students to engage with some of those topics.
And when we say sort of things that you could list, just people who, on this call who may not be familiar with Connect, we're talking here about sort of different types of exercises, right? So sort of maybe some interactive type exercises, or
yeah, so some of the ones particularly for physiology were the sort of lab-based things where you could really engage with different activities, and the students, or the, I could see how different things could move, and you could engage with different steps of a process to see the knock-on effects, which is really, really aligned for physiology. I know maybe not talk anymore because I think some of the other stuff really sits within the anatomy bit.
Okay, all right. Well, then I'll throw to Gabrielle. Thank you.
Thanks. Yeah, I mean, similarly to Alison, it's like, you know, for an anatomist, it's like being a kid in a candy store, isn't it? When you see all these different tools. I also realized that my IT skills are not as good as I thought they were. But no, it's a really good intuitive platform to use, and I think that really helped. Siobhan and I started by dividing up outcomes in the first section that we did. And then soon realized actually to try and get the consistency for the user, it was better that Siobhan did the mapping of the books and I did all of the assessment and quiz stuff. And I think that helped with that building a consistency into the way that things were approached rather than each of us taking outcomes. I think the danger is, because you do get excited, is that you get kind of curriculum creep. So it's really you have to stop yourself adding too much and keep thinking about who's the user, what's the intended audience, and sticking to the remit of that learning outcome. Because he's like, oh, I could just add in a little bit on this, and that'd be really interesting to add in a clinical example there, and I could stick another couple of MCQ, and next thing you know, that's, you know, we all do it in our slide decks. You know, you might give the lecture on, I don't know, anatomy of the breast one year, and then, you know, it's 27 slides, and next year it's got 52 because you keep adding. So I think that was something learning for me, to just make sure I kind of kept it nice and contained. And I think reflecting, there's, you know, that we are very proud of the syllabus. I think it's a good starting point. Looking at them, actually, we probably could revisit it. Some of them are probably a bit more nebulous than I realized at the time. I think just, you know, once you start mapping, you start to find places where you could improve, and just knowing how students approach their learning. So yeah, honest reflection is, I think we could probably tweak them a little bit more, and mapping highlighted that for me.
Yeah, I see. Well, I guess it's still, you know, 100% better than what was there before.
Oh, absolutely.
It was nothing, but then now it can sort
Yeah.
of go and roll and keep iterating, which
That's it.
yeah.
A good example.
Yeah, and so this kind of support package, the package, I guess, we've put together around holes, which is mapping all of those learning objectives to the various resources and Connect. So that's readings as well. So using the smart book, it's mapping it to sort of various areas of the core text that map to each of those learning objectives. And also, as we say, some of those exercises in the kind of anatomy and physiology virtual labs and the cadaver tool and things like that. How do you, just to really sort of be explicit and just lay it out on the line without wanting to be too obvious, how can this benefit both students and instructors? What are the key things that they can of this project that can really help them, whether it's helping reduce student anxiety or just helping instructors to manage their time more efficiently and what have you? What do you think, you guys? Oh, Marie.
I'll take that one. How would it benefit, I suppose, the end user, which is probably what we're all here for, is in terms of how the students become successful with grasping anatomy and physiology, with the use of, I suppose, Connect as an adaptive courseware solution. It is particularly powerful if it can be used within a blended learning module, because I suppose as educators, some of us do grapple with the amount of maybe hours that anatomy and physiology is given in a particular curriculum or even a module. I'm sure it varies from university to university. I know from being a former educator in UCD in Ireland, we were particularly given a very good amount of time in terms of teaching anatomy and physiology, whereas I know from being a member of BINE, we were the envy of BINE because we had the most hours in respect of A&P. So it does vary. So from, I suppose, a courseware solution, it gives instructors kind of the pedagogical tools to offer a blended learning solution in terms of a hybrid delivery. So, you could assign something asynchronously where students can engage with, and they can come to class to become, to have a more kind of an active learning experience. They can maybe an instructor can go straight in terms of into a clinical application or a case study, pulling on the various different asynchronous activities that can be assigned within the Connect environment. So I suppose the bigger benefit of using Connect as an adaptive courseware solution, it is, I suppose, through our work with both Gabrielle and Ali and Siobhan and Colin, it is aligned with the learning outcomes, and with that alignment, any of the activities are assignable to develop an asynchronous or a blended learning framework for A&P subject matter in curricula. So that's probably where I see the biggest benefit of, the next step in relation to the good work of the learning outcomes. So, I mean, within the next few minutes, I will show the Connect platform, because I know there are loads of different individuals on this particular webinar. Some people have their own Connect accounts. Some people are busy building Connect courses at the moment. Some people don't know what Connect is. So I'm happy to dive in and show you what Gabrielle and Ali were.
And so I guess, I don't know if Gabrielle or Alison, you wanted to expand on that in any way about around the sort of because we've talked about obviously the objectives being really key, but also the kind of hybrid teaching and learning approach, also bringing those benefits to sort of making, I guess, just making life easier for instructors, I think. So how would you want to add to that in any way, if I go to Gabrielle first?
Yeah, I mean, I think we've done, there was a lot of hours work. We've done the hard work for people. So hopefully for instructors, it makes it accessible and easy to signpost. And I think it makes the content more manageable for students. So, part of, I've just recently moved into a role in the Central University, trying to look at all of the faculty development and teaching provision. And what people want now in a post-COVID era, staff and students alike, is accessible content. Things like micro, in a university level, micro CPD. And I think what we've got is you can now, if you ask a student to learn all of the anatomy and physiology related to the cardiovascular system, it's so overwhelming. They don't quite know what, even with a learning objective, they still don't quite know where to stop. So with at least everything's mapped, that, you know, if they stick to that content, they can't go far wrong. You know, anatomy facilities, university buildings have, you know, timed, you know, office opening hours and that kind of thing. So at least this is something that they can do, you know, on the move. It's accessible, it's engaging for students, lots of different activities. And I know all, you know, learning styles has been well and truly debunked in the educational literature, but students still do learn in different ways. You know, for those that, you know, who are visual, those who need the kind of quiz and test, retest kind of options, all of that I think is built in and really advantageous for students. I think, you know, it's that hybrid, the blending, the fact that they're not relying on having to be in a university library or a dissection facility or you know, in any sort of lab environment is really useful.
Yeah.
And it's just contained and concise.
Yeah, like that freedom and flexibility to study sort of anytime, anywhere, particularly I guess if they're on their placements, and so they've got quite a lot of their time is already fully occupied. So just being able to kind of dip in when they can, when they have the time to do that, I guess must be pretty helpful.
Yeah, absolutely. Because you could just pick it off and out. You know, I mean, instructors can signpost to certain outcomes in a session, but a student, if they're revising, could choose to just pick off the odd outcome, and it's nicely sectioned.
Yeah, and I think just thinking in Connect and the Smart Book as well, the system will actually remind them which ones they've kind of mastered and which not, right? So when it comes to revision, also that's going to help them revise more kind of effectively. And Alison, over to you.
Yeah, I think the flexibility and the interactive nature is such a strong selling point for students. They are coming now to university with a lot more, with a high expectation of technology and the ability to engage in things a lot quicker than certainly I did when I was doing my undergraduate course. So I think that the variety of different things that the students can engage in, they can work out different things that they like, maybe, you know, different parts of the Connect platform that maybe resonate more strongly or less strongly, and focus on that because there's such a variety. So it's not only by reading a section in a textbook that they could get that content. They can engage in these interactive labs, the section, you know, they can do various different things, and they have a bit of autonomy on how to choose and how to engage in that. And you're right around the flexibility. You know, students are not sitting in their student accommodation when they're not in class. They are out working. They've all got busy lives. They've got so many other commitments. So the fact that they can have this on the go and they can engage in it in different places, particularly for nursing when they're out on their placements or travelling to and from placement, is a real strength. And it's just lovely to have something that's more engaging and interesting than some of than just a textbook.
Yeah, and I think you both talked about in the past with us about that kind of clinical practice as well. So it's, you know, much more than just, you know, a printed textbook where you get, you know, you get the theory's all fantastic, but then actually helping them gain those skills for clinical placements through those tools like you know, like the labs and the anatomy tools. So speaking of which, I'm going to hand over to Marie now, who's going to just showcase a little bit what that looks like inside the platform, so that our guests, they have a better idea of how what we've talked about translates actually into the platform. So over to you, Marie.
I can share my screen. So I'm going to show you now the different types of learning activities within Connect. So this one here is a type of reading assignment associated with one of the physiology learning outcomes, more specifically gaseous exchange at the alveolus and gas transport. So the Smart Book is an AI-driven personalized reading tool for a student, whereby once it's assigned to them, they can start reading and engaging with the particular content. So Ali, I think, put this together, or Colin, sorry. So they identified particular regions within the textbook that would be, I suppose, help a student to gain mastery in that particular learning outcome. Within the system, anything that's highlighted is what the instructor or the subject matter expert deemed to be the most appropriate or the most important in terms of identifying that learning outcome. So once the students have engaged with the reading, then they'll go to questions, and the questions then allows them to formatively assess their learning and ultimately master their learning. And you can see there's a concept checking toolbar up at the top, which the more questions that they get right, the more that the concept checking toolbar will increase, and they'll eventually get to the end of that reading assignment and develop mastery. So that's one of the type of activities that's located within the Connect platform that is assignable. And at the end of this, each student gets a kind of a learning analytical report where it shows them what were the concepts that they found most challenging and what maybe they need to go back and refocus on. So each student will be different depending on what they found most challenging, which is the kind of adaptive response within the system for personalized learning. The other type of learning activity within the Connect platform is a simulated virtual lab, which I know that both Colin and Ali pulled on extensively for aligning two learning outcomes within the physiology aspect of this project. So within the virtual labs, which all come as standard when you use McGraw Hill Connect as an adaptive courseware solution, all of these virtual labs are assignable. So this one is aligning to the learning outcome on the mechanism of breathing, where students engage with it interactively by pulling down on the bell jar, for example, in this image, and also answering a couple of questions in relation to, well, what is it they're seeing? Again, another different type of learning activity associated within the Connect platform, and one that Gabrielle would have worked on in terms of identifying different quiz questions to align with the learning outcomes. There are these ones here. So quiz questions can be of a variety of different types: multiple choice, multi-select, and in this case, a drag and drop functionality. And again, aligning to the learning outcomes right across the anatomy of the respiratory system. The last tool then, located in the last but not least, probably one of the favorite tools of McGraw Hill, is the anatomy and physiology dissection tool, because we do know that there's not enough time maybe in nursing curricula for students to have hands-on anatomy dissection room experience. So, you know, the next best thing is the virtual experience where students can interact with assignable anatomy dissection simulated labs within the Connect platform. And again, all of these aligned with the learning outcomes for anatomy and physiology. And again, you can bring it down to specific regions within the Connect platform. For example, here, looking at the anatomy of both the larynx and the trachea, students identify different regions. In this case, the highlighted region is the trachea. And again, these are things that Gabrielle and Siobhan would have, you know, digitally curated to align with those learning outcomes within the system. And the last, I suppose, thing but not least, and I suppose we've spoken about it, in that students, and particularly nursing students, are so busy, you know, with both theoretical components of their degree and their clinical components, is that the Connect platform is completely mobile friendly. Because I suppose, you know, if we remember back to the pandemic, a lot of us don't want to, but if we do, you know, a lot of students were accessing content through their mobile phones. So it's important to us that the content within the platform is content specific for mobile ready, and also for the iPad and the laptop and the desktop. So, and again, it's a clinical application associated with all of the content within Connect as well. So how does this, I suppose the next step for us is working with instructors to align those learning outcomes with the learning experiences that students can have both asynchronously and synchronously within their A&P modules. And what are the assessment practices, be it a continuum of learning over a period of time or a summative assessment, And how can we integrate technology successfully for students to ultimately be successful within their A&P modules for their nursing undergraduate degrees? So a lot of what myself and my fellow academic consultants, we spend our time working with instructors that are going to use adaptive courseware in this way to start to align their module with our content, and hopefully at the end have students that are more engaged coming to their class, more prepared for active participation. One of another, I suppose, beauty of Connect is that it has the capacity to have, I suppose, a plethora of curricular analytics. So in respect of Connect, it's all down to, what as a cohort do students find challenging in relation to particular concepts that were assigned. I mean, and it's only when instructors start to use this technology that they get access to these reports in terms of, well, how are my students doing in relation to the content? What are they struggling with? And what is it that I maybe need to address in my live class with them for 5 to 10 minutes? So all of this is available within the Connect platform on the basis of using it as a scaffold for learning, if you will, for A&P in biosciences. And I just want to finish off with this is what the class cohort analytics looks like. So we know that learning analytics are powerful in terms of supporting students both inside and outside of the classroom, but instructors need the tools to be able to do that. And asynchronous technology provides them with the tools to be able to support their students. And we're looking at two dashboards here. The 258 one is a midpoint through a module, and the other one is right at the very end. And you can see in red the at-risk category. At the midpoint, there was 77 students that were at risk. They needed support, but at the very end, those students, vast majority of them were successful. And I mean, the power of Connect is to give you, the instructor, access to curricular analytics so that you can support them in terms of their understanding and mastery of A&P. So that is Connect in its totality and all of the range of different activities. What I've done in preparation for this webinar is I have set up a sample course where, if you would be so kind, if you want access to this sample course, just write yes into the chat and we will set you up with access to Connect, albeit it will be student access. So you can be a student for a day or two and experience the platform as a student would in relation to seeing what a SmartBook assignment is like, seeing what anatomy and dissection experience is like. We would be delighted to give you access so that you can experience it for yourself. Yeah, so that's the course today. So my sample course that I'll be giving those people that wanted access will be on the respiratory system, and those activities are aligned with the learning outcomes both for anatomy and physiology. So anything that you will be interacting with in the system, know that it has been digitally curated and aligned with those learning outcomes for anatomy and physiology. And that's me done. If you would love to have a conversation about anatomy and physiology and the power of adaptive courseware to scaffold learning, I would be delighted if you get in touch. There's my email there, or my LinkedIn, or even my mobile number, if you so wish. That's me done.
It was really great to see inside, sort of under the hood, as it were, because I know, we talk about these things, but actually until you see them, you can't quite visualize what that means in reality.
That's exactly it. And apologies for the computer glitches. It wouldn't be a webinar without a computer glitch.
Absolutely. And yes, I can see that lots of people have already put yes in the chat for the to try the sample course as from a student point of view. So please do, I encourage you all to give it a go, because I think, again, until you kind of get hands on with those tools, you can't really see quite how useful they are. And it was great as well to see that you brought in stuff that we haven't really touched on in the rest of the webinar, but about the kind of insights that you get through using something like Connect, that kind of granular depth of understanding of where your students are and how well they are sort of engaging and then succeeding also with the material. I think is what people tell us is one of the great benefits of using Connect. So we have got a couple of questions. Actually, I don't know, before we just move to that, Gabrielle and Alison, was there anything you wanted to add on to, to what Marie has just talked through? Or do you think you've said you said your bit for now?
I would just urge people to have a go.
Yeah.
I think once you get into the system, you'll be hooked.
Yeah. I agree. And Alison.
Yeah, and we didn't obviously get, when we were doing all the mapping, didn't get to kind of have a look at the analytic side of pulling out the data to see, and I suppose it's just really nice to see a bit of that from Marie there, because the potential was really obvious, I think, for us, and we were looking at the integration of it. Now that it's online and the opportunities were there are quite exciting. So it was really nice to see that, and I think that really came across when we were doing the mapping activity that initially.
Yeah, it's probably a multi-part process in that, first of all, for any good technology integration, you have to align your content with learning outcomes, map it to your course, design the course to not have too many activities, as Gabrielle said, because sometimes you can, put in too many. You have to make sure that it's enough for the students. And then once the students are actively engaging with it, then you get access to those curricular analytics, which for the most part, curricular analytics is quite a new thing, I think, in university education, where it's at the moment, it may be just clicks and engagements within a learning management system, where now this kind of analytical data is aligned with particular learning outcomes, particular concepts, which is really powerful for an instructor to see exactly if students are mastering and to celebrate that learning, if they are engaging most well. Because when you use systems like this, you'll see that your students are engaging with content at 2 a.m. in the morning or 5 a.m. when they're on a train. It is really insightful into how much students are doing now, I suppose, in this kind of technological era of teaching them.
Yeah. Fantastic, thank you. So we've got a couple of questions in the chat. So we have got a question around around pricing for this system. But I think Vicky will follow that up with you afterwards, because I think it really depends on a number of factors, whether it's student purchase or institutional purchase or the number of licenses and what have you. So we will follow that up with you on that one afterwards. But just say that would you like?
I will say one thing.
Yeah.
It is far cheaper to go this option than sending students to the bookshop to buy a book. And myself and my colleagues work tirelessly with schools and universities to make that happen. And each I suppose university that we work with, it's all, as you said, Roz, in relation to looking at what the specific needs and requirements are. Every cohort is different, but happy to have a chat with Vicky.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. Yeah, that's what I was going to say as well, that in comparison to the sort of cost of a single textbook, it is considerably more economical to go with something like Connect, and you get so much more for that. So we've also got a question around sort of, we've looked at a lot from the instructor point of view, but from the student perspective, what do we think would be the main benefits for them over more traditional learning methods? So again, I throw to whoever wants to answer that one from a student perspective.
Yeah, I can answer that. I suppose I have, I suppose, seen the benefits of Connect from a student point of view with my colleagues in University College Dublin. A shout out to them, Catherine Redmond and Carmel Davies, who are still using adaptive courseware from Connect at UCD. The benefits to them is that students know where they're struggling and where they're not. And I suppose with A&P, there is that kind of trepidation and anxiety that they do experience when they get into first year, that they feel that they're not going to be able to cope. With the use, I suppose, of adaptive courseware, it allows them to formatively assess their knowledge in a safe space. It is a safe space for them to develop that knowledge. And a lot of the students that, you know, have used the technology have always seen that it is personalized to them, because each student they'll all get there at the end, but they'll get there on a different journey. And that's the beauty of adaptive or AI-driven technology, is that it allows them to do it at their own pace. And that's the benefit for me. It allows them flexibility for learning, both asynchronously and you know, being in the classroom, coming in to the classroom more prepared to have a conversation with the instructor, or take the learning deeper. So it has lots of different benefits. And I suppose I've seen them firsthand as an academic myself.
Yeah, and Gabrielle's put something very similar in the chat. They're just saying how can be accessed anywhere, anytime, and the way that it's mapped and curated makes it very easy for students to cover the content that they need to. So I guess, Gabrielle, I don't know if you want to just sort of expand on that a little bit yourself, or if you think that basically says it does what it says on the tin. But
Yeah, I mean, without repeating too much, you know, what Marie said, I think, you know, analytics do show that students are, you know, the cost of living in particular, you know, there's all of these extra demands on the time. Loans are not significant enough for students anymore, so they're having to work. So having content that you can access on multiple devices at any time, anywhere, is really crucial, and you know, for contemporary learners. And that, I think, just that the breakdown of the content, so it's not just by system, it's not just cardiovascular, but down to the single kind of micro level of a learning outcome, means that it makes it very easy for students then to be able to pick up and, you know, like pick up where they're left off with an outcome, or just makes it more manageable, bite-sized chunks.
Fantastic, thank you. And I think have we got another one that just came in? No, we've answered that one now. And just around the time saving element, I think we did touch on this earlier, but perhaps if we, you know, I've got a question in the chat here that says something about you know, the workload for students is key. So how does the solution help you to kind of manage that workload for those students? I don't know if that's, I don't know if you kind of just answered that, or if it's a slightly nuanced question in that, you know, how do you?
I think a bit. I think one thing that we have a term in Manchester for the students who we call the worried well. So they're the students who are performing well, but if you look at the analytics on lots of, you know, lots of the virtual learning environments and tools and assignments and things, they're spending a disproportionate amount of time doing things because they're so anxious that they don't know everything. And so I think these kind of packages where they're nicely scaffolded, they don't have, you know, we've tried really hard, like I said, not to creep the content beyond what they need to know. I do think it helps to contain those students who have the kind of propensity to go and do too much. And therefore get more burnout. And, you know, it's great they want to learn it all, but actually sometimes the skill is really being able to distill it down for learners, and for them to contain their learning. You know, you see that a lot with kind of more problem-based curricula and that sort of thing, or as our students might call it, DIY curricula. So actually, you know, having a list, as long as if they stick to this, then we know that they know everything they need to know at that level, the right level, the right time. to be safe.
I guess it gives them that confidence that they're covering everything
Yeah,
that they need
exactly.
to, right? They
Yes,
can be
yeah.
confident and sort of relax into it a bit. Yeah.
Yeah, that's it.
And we're coming up to the end. We've just got a couple of minutes left. So I just wanted to throw to Alison maybe for the final words there is, how do you feel that Connect maybe helps students?
I think it's having everything in one place, but having access to different types of activities and things. I really do think with some of it being with that consistency, we know that students will go to different textbooks traditionally. So actually they're now just going to have one space and be able to interact with things differently. I think the key thing is, really following from what Gabrielle's saying about, having things packaged, but also being able to package it across programs so that they don't need to know everything at once, and having that opportunity for students to go back and re-look at things that they maybe looked at in their original first few years and come back. I think that's the beauty of Connect. It doesn't feel like it gets old. You can go back to it if you've not used it for a while and still get something out of it, or recap and revise, which I think is lovely, compared to a textbook where you feel like you've gone through it, you're just going back and doing it again, and that can be quite tiring. So I think there's some real benefits of this interactive platform, but always comes down to the students need to engage, and we haven't talked on that, but it's just we can't do everything for them. But I think this really gives a lot more of them a really solid opportunity to engage well.
That's amazing. Thank you so much. So I want to say a huge thank you to Gabrielle, to Alison, and to Marie for being here today, and thank you so much for all of your insights. We really, really do appreciate it. I hope that everybody who's joined today as guests have got something out of this today. And anyone that said yes in the chat, we will be in touch with the details for your sample course. And of course, if there's anything, if you have any follow-up questions, or if you want to get in touch, then please do. I think Marie had her details up earlier. If you didn't manage to scribble those down, do you want to just put them up quickly, Marie, so we've got them there?
I'll pop my email.
Just to be, yeah, there we go. Emails in the chat. And of course, we will follow up after this session as well. We'll send you the recording in case you want to refer back to it or share it with colleagues or what have you. So, we're now 1 minute past, so I will let you all go. Thank you so much, and see you anon. Okay.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye. Bye.